Some good music from the 1960s, too. Just like the building, it's getting better all the time. So they busted open the wall. Julie and Jeff, members here, busted open the wall of their home, and the dust and particles of 100 years of lath and plaster flew into the air, and out came the Rochester Daily Bulletin, June 26th, 1916, with the headline, "Grace Church Dedicated in Appropriate Manner." Perhaps not the most riveting headline, as we said, in comparison to today's papers, but then again, I probably wouldn't argue that today's headlines are much better in a lot of ways. But this was the day after the dedication of our congregation's third building, soon known as First Universalist Church, after the old Universalist Chapel built in 1866 and Grace Church built in 1877. They had no idea that in the walls of their home, there was insulation speaking about their church. And they found it and they brought it in. So you can come and take a look after service if you'd like to see the paper. The article says, it's a long article about the church, give us a lot of airtime. We'd have to pay a lot to get that much page space in the Post Bulletin today. But the article says, the new home of the Universalists of Rochester was planned with the view of respecting beauty of the old Grace Church. Every brick in its walls was loved by those who had Sunday in and Sunday out worshiped within its portals. It continues that this church is built by living stones as a testimony of faith. They say ours is a Universalist church, pledged to the faith that God's nature is love and that all souls will find their final destiny in harmony with heaven. Ours is a liberal church holding that religion and revelation must be interpreted and measured in every person and in every age by the light of nature and truth and reason. The article takes up like the whole front page, other than the June specials for straw hats or the ad for 3 packages of malted milk for 25 cents, but it lists all of the previous ministers. It describes the service of dedication in full, and it also has a sense of the general contentment of the city of Rochester that a church was built orderly and beautifully in downtown. There's a history of the church, the names of those serving on the board, even on the building committee, so watch out of your name being published 100 years from now, George Houston, in the Rochester Post Bulletin. The article pulled out all the stops, literally, by naming every stop, every pedal movement, and every accessory of the pipe organ in the church, which was deemed, quote, a great feature. And the sermon of dedication was given by the leader of the National Universalist Church of the day, who used words from Genesis in the Hebrew Bible, which says, "This is none other than the house of God and the gate to heaven," saying that religion from the preacher that day stirs the heart and puts sunshine into the mind and the soul. Right next to that, talking about the sun, was an advertisement for Dodge Lumber and Fuel to come and fill your bin for the cold, rainy days to come. So right in the wall of Jeff and Julie's home, little did they know there was the story of their people, the story of their church, like a scroll packed away in lath and plaster. The cost of that new building in 1916 was $25,000. A few years later, the minister told the congregation that if they didn't increase their giving, the church would go down like a sinking ship. So I thought that's a good reason to have the March theme of mortality lined up with the pledge campaign. It also may have just been a mistake by a minister who chose the themes before looking when the pledge drive was, but here we are. So we're not going down like a sinking ship, but we are asking for an increase, as Jim and the stewardship team shared earlier, an increase that's twice the cost of that building in 1916, $50,000. So many of you know all about pledging in congregations. You've heard lay leaders or ministers speak about it for years, perhaps. You know that even if you are uncertain in your income, that pledges are the only way an institution like ours can make any sense of planning or budget for the coming year. So even pledging $1 is still helpful for our planning. And if you can give more, great, just so we know what to plan and your lay leaders know what to plan. Without pledges, we have no church, at least no building or programs, and perhaps most importantly, no heat. But this church is funded solely by all of us, There's no money from out there somewhere, no money from some national church. Most of you know this. And the increases most years are not some extravagant growth plan, but current needs to do the work we're called to do, sometimes underfunded for more than a few years. But more than that, what I want to say this morning is it's a pledge of the heart. Even if you put $0 on your pledge form, I want to invite you to fill out a pledge form, if for no other reason than to turn it in to say, I'm pledging my heart to this church. I'm pledging my heart and whatever I can offer to support it in 1,000 different ways, financial and otherwise, because I want this church to thrive. I want it to flourish, because I believe in its values. I want it to be healthy and strong enough to nourish those already here and to be able to welcome in somebody else who needs this place as much as I did when I came through its portals. We could talk about all the costs for far longer than one day's sermon. Cost of living increase for staff, cost of a few more hours for some positions, increases for committee budgets and annual rates of insurance and maintenance for the building and the property. But we all wouldn't come here, and people wouldn't pledge if it was just about dollars and cents and budget line items. It's about what we do with that. It's about the cost of supporting whatever resources, human and otherwise, we need to create a welcoming, hospitable environment, or communicating our mission and vision with both members and those brand new to our church, connecting people with meaningful service and programming, sharing with someone who has never heard of us before that this church sides with love, and we affirm who they are, and we practice and strive to practice justice and pluralism and inclusion. We know that all costs money. The paper towels, the cleaning supplies, the plowing of snow, the moving of grass, the electricity, again, the heat, and perhaps more importantly, it costs a little money for the crayons and the paper, for the curriculum that sparks the mind of the child, or books and poetry that invite us into deeper reflection with other people face to face in the same room, which is a rarity these days, about who we want to be in the world and how our souls might heal. It costs money to keep the doors open so that we can open hearts and together find meaning together. Because deep down, we know that the cost is too great if we don't exist. If we can't fulfill fully our mission in the world, the cost is too great if our doors are only partially open, our foundation only partially solid, and there is not enough water to solace the dryness of the hearts of those coming in our doors. Because we know someone, somewhere, right now, is needing a blessing on their identity, a reminder of who they are and that who they love and how they break with convention and push boundaries is beautiful and good, and how the world treats them is desecration, because we believe and know them to be, no matter what they hear in the wider world, beloved. Someone somewhere right now, someone is in need of hearing from a place as old school and conventional as a church with an organ and some dude in a robe where they read poetry and they sing songs and they meet in person at an ungodly hour on a weekend morning. Someone is in need of hearing from that place that looks so conventional that their questions and their doubts are as holy as their beliefs and their dreams. Something that maybe they haven't heard before and need to again. Someone somewhere right now is looking for some place, some people, some possibility of what it might look like, could look like, if people loved deep enough, welcomed authentically enough, worked hard enough to be the change that they wish to see in the world. Someone is waiting just outside the doors, wondering if someone has kept the flame burning. The one that says love is stronger than hatred. The one that says hope is more lasting than despair. The one that says their life matters and that peace is possible and that we are to each other family in this world and we need to start acting like it. Someone is waiting just on the other side of our doors, thirsty from wandering in the desert for how many ever hours, days, years where they have felt isolated and alone, wondering, hoping, and praying that deep within the hardened heart of this world, the heart of rock that greets them each day in a newsfeed or in the public square, they are wondering, is there water somewhere for the dryness of my heart? Or have the springs dried up? A writer from southern Indiana writes, "My home is a rolling green land abundant in limestone and the mysterious rocks called geodes. Geodes are so copious in this part of the state," she writes, "that we pile them in our gardens. We think of them as commonplace. And I'm fascinated with these unassuming brown and gray stones because inside them is a sparkling center of quartz crystal. They remind me to look deeper, because often within what may appear quite ordinary is a core of beauty and of mystery." She says, "Often visitors that I show these to while going on muddy walks around my home, they confess that if I hadn't pointed them out, they would have missed their presence entirely. But once familiar with the lumpy look of geodes, these friends begin to see the stones everywhere. Because this is how paying attention works," she writes. "At first I have to look quite deliberately to find the sparkling center of things, but eventually I begin to just notice the patterns, and I come to expect the unexpected beauty." This is a pretty ordinary-looking place of gray stones. We're a pretty ordinary-looking people. No offense. You're beautiful, you're brilliant, you're dazzling, but we're also ordinary. That's okay. Sunday is a pretty ordinary kind of day, and there are other ordinary things here too. Things like breath, and song, and story. Words like hope and like love that take on some different meaning. There is something about this place that for some, it literally saves their lives by reminding them they are mortal and reminding them they are beautiful and that ours is to see the sacred within the common, the miraculous in their everyday lives. It saves their lives, that message, from isolation and despair and loneliness. That's how steel doors become heaven's gate, and four walls, a floor, and ceiling beams become a sanctuary for the soul. And within those walls, we sing and meditate and pray and laugh and cry. We pause and we breathe and we sing together until this experience of being here becomes like a cloak around us. We're surrounded by something hard to describe that feels like we're being held. For so many entering our doors or finding sustenance somewhere like it, it feels like it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Maybe a hard day or months or years. People come in carrying burdens of the world on their shoulders that are crushing them, looking for something sturdy enough to hold them up or at least a spot to set them down for a moment to breathe. We all need those moments. I don't know about you, but I need places like this in the world. To remind the soul that even though it's been a long, cold, lonely winter, you have children singing to you, "Here comes the sun." When we hold the doors open for each other and we save a seat next to us and pledge our hearts as much and more than our dollars, we keep getting better at what we're called to be. We begin to see the beautiful in our everyday lives. We begin to experience and feel and know sunshine in the mind and the soul. And we come together, as in the postlude organ rendition of the Beatles song, which I have to say I've been a little nerdy about, being excited about it being played today, putting a little too much pressure on Connie, because it's the Beatles. It's on the organ. It's awesome. Where else do you get that? Where else do you get come together on the organ on a Sunday morning? We come together right now, right here, because that's what religion is about. Religion comes from the root word religare, the same root word as ligament, which means to bind together. Religion is about community. It's about being together, face to face, heart to heart, person to person. And in the very illuminated walls of this house, filled with the dust and the bugs and the dreams of over 150 years, of children becoming adults, of board taking minutes in their agendas, of annual meetings being planned, of children learning what it means to be human, and of service to the world, and youth and adults learning that over and over again. 150 years of hopes and dreams and tears of blessing newborn babies and blessing the love between two people regardless of their gender identity or sexual orientation, and blessing and remembering with sacred grief the lives of those who have left us in body but not in spirit. That all happens right here, right in this room. Life and death and everything in between. happens in these hallowed walls. 150 years is living right here, sitting right next to you in those same chairs, trying to live lives of meaning and joy. The story of who we are lives in the brick. And more importantly, it lives in the hearts when we gather and light our flame each Sunday, if we but keep putting oil in the lamp to keep it alive. That fountain is there, writes Denise Levertov. Among its scalloped green and gray stones, it is still there and always there, with its quiet song and strange power to spring in us, up and out through the rock. Don't tell me there is no water. It is up to us to keep repainting the house every year, to renew our relationships to this house and to one another. There is water here for the dryness of our hearts. There is a river in the soul. There is water in the rock. There is a light shining. You just have to bust a hole in the wall, and you'll find among what seemed to be only the lath and plaster and dust of years gone by, a story of hopes and dreams that you are now the living incarnation of. It is up to us to keep the doors open, because there's someone waiting just outside those doors, and we know that it costs just too much to keep it to ourselves. May it be so. Amen. Our closing hymn is 10:16.